Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'm going to be your moderator this session, and I'm president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. Our guest this time is Karl Roderfer, supervisor in Tuolumne County, but an expert in just about everything. Karl, welcome.
Thank you very much, Al. And I'm not sure I'm an expert in anything, so we'll find out.
It's hard for me to find areas that you don't have a lot of knowledge of. We shared time in Tuolumne County on the Chamber Government Affairs Committee for a number of years. And looking back, that was very enjoyable for me and also very informative.
Well, I think it's a good forum. It keeps our chamber aware of what is going on in government, both locally, state, and federal. So it's a good forum.
Yeah, there's a lot of participation from public officials there. Aside from the supervisors, they had representatives from other departments and agencies, and quite a large number of people at those meetings, maybe as many as 20, at least at the time when I was there.
Yep, and all of the elected officials typically send representatives, staff representatives from their offices, so that it's a pretty good forum. Like I said, keeps people informed.
Now that's great. I know Tuolumne County has a number of issues that are unique to that county, but some of the issues are also issues that Calaveras County is suffering with, and mainly that's things that comes from the state of California, which affects all the counties. And tell me, what are some of the things that you think are of most concern right now?
Well, as you may know or not know, I'm also our county's representative to the National Association of Counties. And in that capacity, I also sit on the Western Interstate Regional Caucus, which is largely rural counties. And I think almost all the western rural counties share some concerns in the area of federal land management, Environmental Species Act, and National Environmental Protection Act. And of course, we've got CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act as well. So I think we all share some of those issues. I'd maybe even take issue with the fact that we've got some unique issues in Tuolumne. What I've found as I run through all of the associations that we deal with is we have a lot in common with virtually all rural counties, and certainly the mountain rural counties, the foothill counties up and down the Sierras.
One of the concerns a while back with our rancher friends was increasing regulations on grazing lands. Do you have information about that we should know?
Well, I don't know about information that you should know, but I'm concerned about it, and I think most elected local officials are concerned. I'm not I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it seems like the cattle industry in particular is really under the gun from environmental groups, state, federal. We're having some problems with access to the forest lands in terms of permitting access. There seems to be constant pressure to try and cut back that access. That directly impacts the cattle industry, and that is a significant concern. And certainly the rimfire that we had a couple of years ago, year and a half ago now, I guess, didn't help that because it just made the environment tougher for the Forest Service to let them back in. So there are concerns, and I think some of the coming potential encroachment, the grazing regulatory action plan that's circulating about, it's a management plan without a problem. I kind of like the idea of if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think you can over-engineer a system, and that's, to me, seems to be what's going on right now. That does concern me, and it kind of flows into the water issue with the drought as well in terms of how we manage our water system, both for other species, and I emphasize other species because the human is a species as well, and I don't want to see us become endangered. So the whole aspect of state and federal lands management and some of the regulatory issues, I think concerns everybody in the foothills.
I saw an editorial in, I think it was the Union Democrat, about the cost of fish due to the price of water. And I understand that there's some fish that are worth $1 million or more, and maybe you can help us to understand that.
That was I read the article with, and my tongue was in my cheek when I was reading it. I don't question the math. There's a real significant issue, and I think you were at the forum that I was a panelist on with Frank Bigelow and Tom McClintock over in Copperopolis, where we talked about the issue of environmental releases from our reservoirs in a time of a drought. And certainly, I consider myself as much of an environmentalist as the next person, but I'm a realistic environmentalist, and if we didn't have the dams, the rivers would be dry now anyway, and the fish wouldn't have those flows, nor would the Delta have those flows for controlling salinity and all the other reasons that we send environmental flows down the rivers. So I think that during time, I don't think you can have a one-size-fits-all times kind of approach to releases out of the reservoirs. I think you have to mitigate some of the reasonable environmental concerns in times of drought based on the whole picture of what our society, the environment, and everything is going through. And I'm just not sure, well, I'm pretty sure we're not doing that right now. So.
Yeah, we agree with you. The Taxpayer Association is very much excited about stopping these draining our lakes in a time of drought.
Well, one of the things that many people may not think about routinely is our entire water structure in the state of California was designed for flood control, and predominantly,
right, and
water delivery secondarily. When they were doing all of the planning and the calculations for that water system, environmental flows were not part of that. And right now, approximately 50% of the water that is released from reservoirs in any given year goes to environmental flows. So it really impacts the original calculations and planning factors that they use when they designed the system. Mankind has done, I think, an exceptional job in terms of growing the population, in some cases almost doubling the population, depending on how far back you want to look, and yet using the same amount of water, or maybe even a little bit less. So we've been able to compensate for that a little bit, but you can't conserve to zero.
Right.
So I think it's time to start relooking, and if the forecasts are to be believed, and we're going to go into a period of more aridness and warmer period, and I'm not going to say whether I think that's true or not, but if it is true, then we're not just talking about engineering our systems for flood control, but we're also talking about engineering our systems for drought sustainability. So we need to relook at the architecture, I think.
I understand that we haven't built dams in California for 40 years.
Yeah.
And if we had, we might not be in this problem we have now.
Well, I think we have built dams in the last 40 years. Most of them have been down in Southern California, if my facts are accurate. I'm not an expert in Southern California water. I could be wrong. But I believe we have built some off-stream storage down in Southern California. And kudos to them, and kudos to their ratepayers that were willing to bear the cost of that. But we need to start looking at that across the state. We do need some more storage if we're not going to have the snowpack, which is 80% of our storage capacity in any given year,
Right.
In any given good year. Then we need to compensate for that somehow. And I don't have all the answers on that, but I look to the experts to tell us how to do it. But I think certainly we have to do that.
I think there's some good news along those lines. I heard that there's 16 or 17 new plants, desalination plants going on in Southern California, San Diego.
I think San Diego County is to be applauded. They started out, I don't know how many years ago, several, and their community made a commitment to significantly decrease their reliance both on the Colorado River and also LA Metropolitan, which is where they got, those two sources were where they got most of their water at the time. Through a lot of different kinds of projects, and desal being a major one, they're attempting to become water independent. And truthfully, I think if we're going to solve the state's water problems, that's really what all the major metropolitan areas need to be headed towards.
Right.
Trying to get their reliance off of imported water to the maximum extent possible. That's costly, and it's costly in dollars and investment, but it's also, there are some impacts on environment, and we need to make sure that we do that smart. But we need to look. Israel's been doing desal since I was in college, I think, and I don't know what the percentage of their water that they get, but it's a vast majority of the water comes out of desal. So it's a proven technology, and certainly any coastal metropolitan area ought to be looking at it, I think.
That's interesting. I don't know if there's any investigation along these lines, but it seems like we have nuclear submarines with a nuclear plant small enough to fit into a submarine. And I'm sure there's plans that can be copied for that. And it seemed like you'd be able to set up a nuclear source of power to run desalination plants. I think that the thinking now is to try to use solar, but solar is not quite as efficient as nuclear.
Again, I'm not an expert, an engineer, a water engineer, or a nuclear engineer. I just know that desal is feasible because it's being done other places, and I think it's a logical solution that we need to look at. I'll let the experts decide how to deal with the cooling and the heating and all of the things that go into it. But we can't leave technologies off the table.
Right.
We've at least got to consider them. If there's some good reasons to not pursue them, let's talk about them. But let's at least consider them. One
of the things that our taxpayer group is concerned with, along with a lot of elected officials, is sort of a movement, a sustainability movement, that's seeking to change the human footprint on this planet, and in particularly the United States, to dial back our civilization, Western civilization, to some point in the past, where there's more walking, little or no cars, and a whole different structure. And I'm wondering if some of the problems we're having now relate to that philosophy. For instance, the drive to remove timber, private timber, from the national forest. We had quite a controversy some years ago over what was called clear cutting. This is when timber companies actually create tree farms where the trees are spaced appropriately apart, and they're much more healthy, much more economical to harvest, and with greater yield. And also the snow is allowed to land on the ground in shadow between them, giving a larger amount of reserved water. And I noticed that what's being done now is to try to mimic that using taxpayer money through mechanical means to thin forests out, to try to reduce the fuel load. But when you consider the vast amount of acreage that's subject to this, like the rimfire is a natural consequence. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think virtually everybody, I think, in the state of California now is coming to the realization that if we don't do something with respect to our forestry management issues in the Sierras and the Cascades, that there will come a day that that part of California will burn to the ground, and that's not.
It's happening.
I know but that's not a doomsday scenario. If you look at the curves of fire frequency, intensity, acreage, all of them, they're exponentially increasing to our public safety detriment. The Sierra Nevada Conservancy is concerned about it. Virtually every foothill county is concerned about it, and obviously we had to deal with an emergency situation in my county in the first year of my supervisorial tenure. So I understand up close and personal what the potential result can be, and we've seen other fires that in some ways were, although not bigger, in certain restricted areas were even more intense than the rimfire was. So we need to address that. There's no doubt about it, and that gets back a little bit to the federal lands management issue that I was talking about earlier, because truthfully, almost all of the mismanaged land is federal lands.
Yes.
And I'm not necessarily a proponent, because then I'd have to deal with it, of them not being federal lands, being in local hands. But if it needs to be, I'd be okay with that. I have no idea how we would manage that money-wise, nor do I know how Calaveras County would do that. So the whole structure the whole system would have to be restructured. But it's a big problem, and it's a problem that we got into over the course of about 4 or 5 decades, and we're not going to get out of it with even a significant investment of money, government money, in less time than that. And probably it will take more, because while we're cutting or thinning, however we're doing it, the forest is growing while we're doing it.
Growing quicker than we're cutting.
Exactly. So it's going to take some governmental investment. It's going to take some private investment. It's going to, and I believe the timber industry is willing to invest if they have a long-term commitment that their investment is not going to be washed away from them. So it needs to be addressed. It does impact our water yield. It impacts our water quality. I don't believe, because we are in a drought, that we've seen the worst of rimfire yet in terms of water issues, because with less rain, there's been less runoff and less siltage in Don Pedro and other reservoirs down the hill. So it impacts a lot of things, and it just absolutely has to be addressed. But it's going to take, I think, a public, private, state, federal, local partnership to get it done in any reasonable amount of time.
In the past, as I understand it, there was a tremendous amount more lumber, timber in the national forest that and it's been reduced maybe 80% or maybe as much as 90%. But in reducing
You're talking timber harvesting?
timber harvesting, yes.
Oh, okay.
Where they put
Because the timber hasn't been reduced.
no, well, the timber harvesting
Okay.
has been reduced. And it's been done over supposedly environmental concerns, or at least from the environmental lobby. But I'm wondering if hindsight now tells us that that was really a mistake.
Well, I think clearly it's a mistake. I just, the problem is, in many ways, the Forest Service hands are tied in two ways. One is money.
Right.
They only get so much from Congress. And that, up until recently, largely has been siphoned, not largely, but greatly has been siphoned off to fight forest fires.
Right.
They took the money for timber harvest plans and used it to fight forest fires.
Which were caused by mismanagement to begin with.
Which were caused because we didn't take enough timber out of the forest. On the other side of it, their hands are tied legally because it doesn't take much under NEPA or CEQA to tie something up in courts for years.
Yes.
I think we really need some either NEPA and CEQA reform or some tort reform. Somehow we have to get to where decision makers can make lawful decisions and enact those decisions and see the results. The public can see the results.
Well, we sure agree with that.
So, what you've got is an environment right now where small, self-interested, single-issue interest groups can tie things up, and you can't do your job.
Right.
And we've got to get away from that. I was elected to do a job.
Right.
Your supervisors were elected to do a job. And yet, constantly, there are situations where we make perfectly legal and accurate, good decisions, well-meaning decisions. The county or the developer gets sued, and the developer walks away because it's not worth the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases, if it's a large project, maybe millions of dollars, that it's going to take to get to a successful solution in a court with no guarantee that the solution will be successful. So
It reminds me of the Lowe's issue in Sonora.
yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that we could hope for is an approach which would allow more timber harvesting to occur, and with it, more responsible management of the timber. The private companies on the land they own don't seem to have the problem that the federal government does.
No, actually, I think SPI, as an example, had a huge footprint of timber in the or timbered land inside the rimfire footprint, and within, I believe, the first year, they had their entire acreage cleaned up.
Yes.
Forest Service is going to be a decade, probably, certainly 5-6 years minimum, getting what they're going to get cleaned up, and there's a majority of that forest that will never get cleaned up.
Which would be future problem.
Future fuel.
Yeah.
For future fires, yes.
So looking at the overall picture, it seems we need an educational effort. Maybe mostly I hate to blame the media for things, but if the public was only aware of what's happening and the causes of what's happening, it wouldn't happen. The amount of apathy we have now is just incredible, and I think that the media can be very helpful in getting this information to the public.
Well, I'm not going to badmouth the media. Here I am talking to you and the media. I agree there is some education, but one thing that I am encouraged by, and I have been encouraged by coming out of our rimfire experience in specific, but other experiences as well, is that people and organizations that were a year or 2 or 3 or 4 ago of one mindset in terms of forestry management in particular, but maybe some other approaches to taking care of our environment properly, have I believe come to realize that in some ways they might have been contributory to the problem, and that the problem is greater than they ever anticipated that it would be, and that the time to act really is now. We've got a very good collaborative organization that came out of the Rim Fire, YSS. It's a Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions Group. I believe that's what YSS stands for. I'm not our representative on it, but our board is represented by 2 of our supervisors, Randy Hanvelt and Sherry Brennan. It is a broad-based group of stakeholders, and it has done some exceptional things, to include the restoration plan for the forest, helping draft that and coordinate on it. Again, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, I think, is really taking a lead now on the necessity to immediately address the forestry management issues that are not getting better as we go along, and they need to. So I see a lot of groups that were on opposite sides of the table in a lot of cases that are getting together and finding some reasonable solutions. I think that's important, because again, with our legal structure the way it is, until we can modify that in a positive way so that we can actually get something done, you do have to work with people. And I have my own political views, but I was elected partially because of my political views, but I was also elected to get things done.
Right.
And I think to get things done, you have to work with people, and you have to work with everybody that needs to be at the table. So I see some positive things. I'm hoping that they bear fruit. I've seen some of that fruit born already over in Tuolumne County with our YSS group. I'm hoping that we can keep that collaborative going and work some of the other issues that are going on over there. I don't know that we'll be able to, but I'm encouraged by it.
I wonder if we can duplicate that in Calaveras County. That sounds interesting. You said YSS?
Yeah, I think it's the Yosemite Stanislaus Solutions Group.
Do they have a website?
I believe they do.
Probably we could Google YSS, and if we can't do that,
If not, the 2 Mike Albrecht and John Buckley are the co-chairman of it.
Oh, that's quite a difference in philosophies with those 2.
That ought to tell you something, okay? So you can get in touch with whichever one of those that you're more partial to, and I'm sure they could help you out.
Oh, that's very good. We're coming toward the end of our program. We want to thank you for watching. And also consider checking our website out, calaveраstaxpayers.org. Now, you can also, when you shop at Save Mart, get one of our shares cards. We'll be glad to give you one. And part of your purchases will be a donation to us to allow us to continue our work. And again, thank you for watching our Taxpayer Alert program. See you next time. And thank you, Karl.
Thank you, Al.